Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome for a second time a very senior and respected banker turned author, an advisor, a consultant, a fellow member of the YPO from Bangalore, India, Sandhya Vasudevan. Sandhya, welcome to the show.
Ashutosh, lovely to be here again.
Thank you. Sandhya is an author of a book titled Hatching Butterflies, and all of you know that I'm very partial to authors. She's an independent board director, a board advisor, and a consultant. She's the former managing director of Deutsche Bank. And as I mentioned, she's a fellow member of the YPO. So Sandhya, today we're going to speak only about your book. And before I ask you my first question, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Sandhya Vasudevan's book, Hatching Butterflies. I have a copy, and I think it's an amazing book that all of you must read. So my first question to you, what was the inspiration to write Hatching Butterflies?
To be honest, there is no inspiration. Ram Anand, the publisher, reached out to me, and then he chased me a couple of times. Then his team chased me. Then I said, I haven't written a book, so why not? I think what was more difficult was to choose a subject on what to write. And that was when I realized I do a lot of mentoring for people. So it seemed like a logical thing. That's an area that I know. I know a lot of positive feedback comes because people find life experiences helpful. And that's how I landed up writing Hatching Butterflies.
Yeah, like I know Ram, he's been on my show as well. And he can be very persuasive. So I'm glad he got you to write your book. But Sandhya, tell me, when I was preparing for this conversation, you also talk about an emotional journey of transitioning from a corporate career to a self-determined future.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about this, and did this have an impact on this book?
Very much so. It was, after the second bout of COVID, things were quite intense. We had all gone through how do you keep your team safe? How do you keep your family safe? All of that was happening in the outside world, as it were. On a personal level, a couple of years before, my father had fallen ill. So elder care and work were my two pillars of my life. I had literally dropped every other activity because not enough time. And I think one fine day or gradually it hit me, my corporate career is over. I need to do something else. And that's when it felt that I had to move on. There was a bit of a push. There was a bit of a pull. The pull for me was, hey, there are so many interesting things happening outside. And the push was, do I really want to be doing the same thing again, even though it might be a new job, a new role, everything. But that's what happened.
So tell me a little bit more about how your father's illness influenced your decision to make a change in your career.
I think all of us, we assume that we have a focus on our jobs, on our career goals. Where are we heading? We want to accomplish a number of things. But we forget we are whole human beings, family, friends, our own personal health, or maybe even other dimensions of our lives, whether it is more spiritual or whether it's, I just want to do more hiking, something comes in. And in my case, I think in 2017, my dad fell ill. Until then, he had been completely independent. He and my mother had their own life. It was all okay. So I could just do what I wanted. 2017, I realized that he could no longer take his 4 injections of insulin on his own. He was slowly withdrawing from the conversations, and he wanted me as an anchor point. And being an only child, it felt it would be difficult to manage both. And I found I had a very commuting job. I was traveling all the time. And that's when I said, okay, I take this on. And it was an emotional journey because you're used to running and doing things in the professional life. And so I started looking for something else, which should enable me to be based in Bangalore, enable me to have that balance to do elder care. Initially, actually, it was quite awkward because I landed up talking to people and it was more, I need to be here. I need to take care of my father. And a friend of mine said, nobody is ever going to hire you. Because you're talking about yourself and your needs. You're not talking about what the company needs and how you can contribute to the,
Correct.
to that space. And fortunately, one of my previous bosses needed a global head for procurement risk as well as for APAC. And that turned out to be a good opportunity. Uh, it is a tough one because I remember Ravneet Singh, who's also one of the people who had written and endorsed me in the book. I remember him telling me, yeah, it's a tough choice. You're, taking a different decision for your career. I didn't appreciate what it meant at that time. I think in retrospect, I do.
Great response. And, you did mention that you realized time had come for you to move on. But what, for our viewers and listeners, tell us what were some of the key factors that made you realize it's time to leave the corporate job and start something that you are going to be more passionate about?
I've always loved my job. It didn't matter what it was. You have a sense of, hey, this is exciting. This is something new to do. This is something new to learn. And maybe it was the fact that COVID had been fairly intense. Maybe it was the fact that my father had been, he passed away at that time. Or maybe it was just the, when you're at a senior level, after a point, the organizational dynamics, politics, whatever you call it, takes its toll. And my gut told me it's time to move. On the surface, I spoke to HR, I spoke to my boss, both of whom said, no, stay on. But the organization went through a structural change. And I did take the time to say, let me explore what's there, because yes, my gut says to get out. But if tomorrow I have not explored it, I may not like it. But anyway, fortunately, the universe conspired. But I think the pull factor to get out for me was two things. One was I had gone out for lunch. It was between the COVID times. And the Karnataka government, some of the political leaders were there, the government guys were there. And I spoke about, hey, we should have something on quantum, deep tech. And within a couple of weeks, they asked me to come in and say, hey, can you provide a proposal around this? And I roped in Kiran Karnik. We had a number of meetings and they took that forward in their budget. And what made me feel was, hey, there's stuff like this where, yes, I'm not an expert, but because I'm willing to connect the dots, I could probably contribute. And that's when I felt, hey, it's time to do stuff which I like, which is around innovation, growth, change, and well, both came together.
Very interesting, and good luck in your new avatar. But my next question, Sandhya, is you talk about a life well lived. Tell me a little bit about how do you define a life well lived, and how has this evolved over the years for you?
I think it's a really good question because we as individuals, we think about our careers. That's typically where, when we're talking within the professional circles, but we're not just our careers, we're a lot more. And I remember long back, it was a time management book which said, write down all the things you want to do, including, I remember writing down, I want to read the entire, all the Shakespeare's plays and writings. But what was good was it asked you to define what, and it asks you to put it into the time. So, and this is a very long time back. As I was over the years, as I've been going through, and I came across something called the Life Book, which is actually a very good tool. And it talks about almost 12 different elements of your life, whether it is your spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, your social relationships, career, finance, what is the quality of life that you want, all of it. And it is fascinating when you start breaking it down into what do I want? What's the vision in that direction? What is the strategy that I want to put in place to realize it? But I think there were two dimensions which I really liked. One was, why do I want it? And often we don't explore the why enough, because
Mm.
once you understand the why part of it, a lot of things fall into place.
Correct.
The second dimension was, what are the underlying beliefs, conscious or otherwise, around these topics? So let's take one of the things which is very closely aligned to your career is your financial well-being.
Correct.
Now, what does that mean? For me, I've always looked at finance as a means of being independent.
Mm.
It gives me the ability to make my own choices and live my own life.
Correct.
Now, that number can be anything. For someone, it might be 1 lakh. For another person, it might be 1 crore. For another person, it might be a 5 billion number. It doesn't matter what.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of a thing which is there. And over a period of time, you tend to find the balance of where you want to be.
Well said. Well said. You also speak about some lessons you've learned from Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Work Week. And it's interesting, only day before yesterday, I was reading Japan is actually introducing a 4-day work week.
Yes, yes. I read this book almost 15 years ago, when it came out around that time. And I was really excited, saying, oh, I've got to kind of have only a 4-hour work, a 4-day week, 4-hour work day, whatever it was. You were obviously working 12 to 14 hours a day on an average.
Yeah.
I missed a flight one day. It was a morning flight, and my next flight was in the evening. I didn't really have to do anything professional that day because most of it was in-person meetings. So I didn't have that. So it was one of those days when he said, I can do anything I want. I can go to a museum, I can read a book, I can go shopping, I could just listen to music, whatever. And because I had been reading this book, I decided to write down what, I forget the exact the way he titles it. It's basically, what's your dream life in that way? It is, what do you have? What do you want to be? And what do you, so being, having, and doing. That's, a simple way to look at it. And it made me realize that you could redefine everything. Say, I want to travel. It doesn't mean that you have to wait till you're retired and you have enough cash to travel. You could find a job that enables you to do so. So it's that kind of a thought process, which I really love, because you don't need to look at it in traditional terms. The second piece for me was, how can you be more efficient? How do you get rid of stuff that you don't need to do? Okay, you have 20,000 mails. Don't keep doing it through the day. Fixed times. Immediately, it becomes cleaner. Everybody starts responding to you. I think that is more the productivity and efficiency part of it, which I like, which you took to your workplace. The third element is about learning. Are you constantly learning something new? Which means you have two things. One is your brains are picking up a new field, a new subject, but you're also picking up a new set of people, network, which sparks you as well. So I think if I would say three things that have always stayed with me, the rest is more details for me, but these were the three that kind of stayed with me.
Well said. Well said. The other question that I wanted to get your perspective on is, how did you manage stress and maintain a positive mindset, especially when you were faced with challenging times?
I came across a phrase over the weekend. If I had known, I would have included it in the book. It's called mental hygiene. And it's frankly what most people talk about. How do you handle stress? First, I think you need to recognize if you have adrenaline fatigue. Are you tired? And there is a complete, almost a bell curve, which tells you where you are on that journey. If you find yourself getting angry with people, and typically we do that with our families, or irritated, or feeling a sense of real anxiety, you're seriously tending towards a burnout, and one needs to be cognizant of it. So I think it's important to see where you are on that spectrum. So which is almost a daily thing. So at the end of each day, when you reflect on what you've done, did you reasonably feel positive about most of the activities you were involved with? Then you know you're in a good shape. If you are feeling, oh my God, why on earth am I doing all of this? Then you need to think about what is wrong. So I think first is being aware of fact that you have stress, or where are you in that state of well-being. Second is very practical stuff. Exercise. It doesn't matter what form. For me, it's
Mm.
walking, yoga, Tai Chi, that kind of thing. And I really love it. Without it, I don't think I can be sane. I think the type of food you eat, and each one can pick their own approach, whether you're going in for fasting to eating sensibly through the whole day, it doesn't really matter. Take
Mm.
what works for you and think in terms of, for me, it's about, can I be at my peak state of health?
Mm.
Health is not about going to the doctor and finding out. For me, it's all
Yeah.
about how do I stay really fit so that my brain is operating at its best thing. It could be as simple as hydration.
Mm.
The last one is, the third one is sleep. It's absolutely vital. And I actually have not been very good at it. It's only now I'm forcing myself to become more self-aware around that sleep thing. We all make a big deal about, oh, I can do with just 2 hours of sleep. True, but at what cost?
Mm.
So I think that's the other one. The last but not the least is, what are some of the things you do for calming yourself down? It could be as simple as painting, listening to music,
Mm.
walking in nature, meditation,
Mm.
take your pick. So
Mm.
I think so these are some very practical tools that one needs to have. And I think we forget the last one,
Mm.
hanging out with people
Mm.
with whom you can just relax.
Mm.
It could be, yes, last night I was with a group of people where they were talking about all the weirdest rumors that they had heard. You knew it wasn't fun, but it made you laugh. And the
Mm.
more you're able to laugh at some of these things, that
Correct.
makes a huge difference to stress.
Very well said. Absolutely amazing points you've given. Sleep, exercise, eat right, laugh, and all the things that are necessary. Meditate. All things that you've said are important for managing our daily lives, and I think that really comes with a little more maturity, which you've spoken of so well just now. Since you spoke about friends and laughing, my next question is, how important is networking, and what strategies should our young viewers and listeners use to build networks?
I think it's very important. Human beings are not isolated beings. We need the support of others. One, for our own well-being, but we also offer that well-being to the other one.
Correct.
So I think obviously we start with our immediate family. And if you're fortunate, they are your support, your fan, take your parents. They'll, even if you're 80, they'll probably, and they're still around, they'll probably be very happy if you've done something nice or if you
Absolutely.
something.
Hmm.
I think you need that nurturing support of a few people. Some of them may also give you some very hard messages on you're being a fool about something. That's equally important, but
Yeah.
they have your well-being at heart.
Absolutely.
But as you move out from your family and your friend circle, you need to have, especially in the professional world, I see two groups. One group which is supportive, they will give you ideas, connects, maybe even listen to your issue and say, okay, you may need to think about this. They give you practical stuff. So for example, YPO has its forum where your colleagues will be able to give you lenses on an issue that you may not really think through in that light.
Mm.
But there's another group which we usually ignore. They're people who make you very uncomfortable. They'll challenge your position on any topic.
Mm.
And they are very important because, for example, I remember I said, I'm interested in healthcare. I want to do something. And this person told me, listen, Sandhya, you come from the financial sector. You're involved in technology. Nobody's going to ever take you seriously in that space.
Mm.
But what struck me was, can I find a role where I can get taken seriously? And my role there is that of a caregiver and potentially a patient. And I'm the customer in that ecosystem.
Correct.
And I have a right. So in that context, there are, for example, today I'm passionate about quantum sciences. I can never be a quantum scientist. I can never be taken seriously in that field. But what I can do is I can be an evangelist.
Correct.
I can be a person who says, how will this impact, let's say, the financial sector? Or what is the opportunity for commercializing it at scale? And say, oh, this is what the West is doing or Europe is doing. Where is India standing in that thing? So as a thinking person, I can bring that kind of thought process.
Yeah.
So you need all of these kinds of network. And I can say when I left Deutsche, within 2 years, I had a completely different network of people.
Yeah.
I didn't go back to the first.
Very well said. Great response. So Sandhya, I have time for 2 more questions for you. My next question is, how do you see the future of work evolving, especially for people who are senior corporate leaders? I've been through that change and I'm older than you, but I went through a similar change when I left the corporate world. You've done it. I'd love to get your wisdom about this.
I think the good news for all of us today is earlier you had somebody who reached 58 and they had to retire. Now, corporations can have their retirement age 65, 75, doesn't really matter, whatever the age is. And I've seen a lot of people say, I've completed my corporate life. I want my second career. And my second career is to be a landscape artist, organic farmer, take your pick. And the other day I met an astrophysicist who's turned an organic farmer.
Amazing.
And it is fascinating because we're trying to put together agri-fintech community. And so I said, we'll invite you to that working group. So he comes back promptly saying, as an academician, please give me enough information so that I can come prepared. That's so refreshing from someone who's working in the field who says, let me just share what I know rather than thinking through how do I prepare it for this event. So what I find is, yes, you can get onto boards. And if you want to be really honest, there are very few boards where they ask you to be more proactively engaged with the company. More often they say, come or learn about it, do your due diligence, but they don't want to be actively involved. So one is when I chose my boards, it's, can I really contribute? And do they want me in that role? That's when I've said yes. The second thing is, if you're happy with that, that's okay. The second part is, do you have other interests that you want to build on? I like to explore. So for me, you're seeing my background. That's Asia, which is a think tank out of Sri Guru Gobind Tricentenary University. And it's got some amazing people who are part of that. And I'm really fortunate to be on that board. Of course, being called a distinguished professor there's a part of me that doesn't believe that I can get called that because you don't come from that background, but it is an amazing exposure to different things. So I was talking to Rekha Menon the other day, and so I was telling her, listen, some people tell me that I'm all over the place. She said, no, you're exploring and having fun doing it. So yes, I do have my boards. I do have a few people for whom I do consulting, but I also do spend a lot of time with startups. You're learning what they're up to. And you're able to share your life experience with them, but you're also involved with saying, okay, I attended, for example, the Economist conference on commercializing quantum. And I spent the next couple of weeks writing up detailed notes on it, which is fun. So I think if you're a senior professional trying to get out, think through what do you want.
Absolutely.
If you have a goal, that's great. If you don't have a goal, identify, put yourself, I need to find my goal, and then say, where are you today? What are the options? What's the gap between your goal and where you are? And then what are the options for your way forward? I call it P-GROW in my book. That's professional goals. What's your reality? What's your options and what's your way forward? I actually did about 3 or 4 sprints when I got out. And that helps you to say, and that's actually how the name of the book also came. A butterfly hatches from its eggs. So what is the idea that I want to explore and take it to its fruition? And that's what I think a lot of senior people can do. Amazing. Don't wait for someone to give you your next job. That's not coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no capsule made that you can eat and you'll have your next gig automatically available. Well said. And my last question to you, coming back again to your book, uh, and this is for a lot of our viewers and listeners, young, all of them. What are some key takeaways from your book that you hope readers will apply to their own lives?
I think Ravneet called it out. He said it's a book for change and transformation.
Mm,
So it gives you a bit of a framework
mm,
in terms of, okay, do you have a goal? If you don't have a goal, think about it. And how can you go about finding that out? So
right.
in my case, I spoke to about at least 100, 200 people to say, how do they look at it?
Mm,
But make sure that you're contributing something back into that network when you're kind of engaging.
yeah.
So I had little projects which I was doing, which people found interesting as well. So conversation was not only one-sided, tell me what. It was also, I'm doing this. Do you find that interesting? What else do you see? So I think first, understand what your goal is. As you're looking at your reality, I had to look at my reality and say, I'm not a quantum physicist, but I
Mm,
love learning. So I
yeah.
probably have read more about it than the average Joe, which also means that in your own way, you're able to find connections that others may not. So think
Mm,
through what is your strength. And that life book was a very interesting one. Is it your mental capability? Is it an emotional thing that you need to explore? So think through, you're more than your career.
mm,
I think the other bit for me, honestly, while you're doing all of this, is what is your value system?
mm,
And that's very important.
mm,
And therefore, as you're going through life, even whether you're a young person or an
yeah.
older person, last night it was with a couple of professors, and they were talking about, as a young person, what do you tell that a young student on what kind of life should they live? Because they're going to be creating the future. So
Mm,
therefore, that dialogue becomes very important. So in fact, at one point, somebody said, why are you writing that chapter on values and beliefs? I come from a banking sector where we've been dinged very badly for not maintaining that faith.
yeah. Yeah.
And therefore, it was an important dimension. I think the other bit is acknowledge where you are in your journey.
Mm,
Do you need more financial strength? So a friend of mine decided he'll go into the NGO sector. Then he found that his children in the US were studying,
mm,
required a lot more money. Now he's back in the Middle East saying, okay, I've got to meet my financial goal, otherwise it's not good for me.
absolutely.
At the end of it, the purpose of this book is to help you navigate change and transitions. It can be in the early stage of your career, at a later point in your career, but you look at it more holistically. And you have some practical tools, including the one on resiliency. How do you build that?
Right. Correct. And on that note, Sandhya, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your book, Hatching Butterflies. I think it's a book, as you said very rightly, about change and transformation. I think everyone should pick up a copy and read it. But thank you for talking to me about so many different aspects of your life that seem to have had a major influence on writing your book. Thank you also for sharing some personal stories about the relationship with your dad and how that had an impact on your book. We spoke a little bit about live life well lived. We spoke about the 4-hour work week. We spoke about networking and so many other points. I wish I had more time to keep on talking to you about so many other things that we were not able to cover in our conversation today. Thank you again and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. I truly loved talking to you, and all the very best.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.